All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Josiah Clark, and I'm the Grant and Program Lead for the Office of Housing Support here at Development. Um, this office is the one that hosts Taylor's section, the supportive housing section, which is where all the programmatic stuff for the supportive housing program um, is at. It's a mouthful to keep all those straight. But thank you all for being on here today. Um, I'll forward the slide. Here's just some of the things that we're going to talk about. First and foremost, what is this new grants management system called Salesforce that we'll be using in place of Ocean for at least the application purposes for this upcoming application? How you can access it using the OHID system, the application as a whole, which I have a bunch of screenshots that we'll be able to walk through. It's very similar to how it was in Ocean, just things look a little different. Technical assistance if you have any problems with the system itself, and we'll have time for questions at the end. But like I mentioned, I think before we started recording, if you have any questions that you want to put in the chat, we'll come back around to those when we have the availability to do so. For a quick overview of what Salesforce is, you'll hear us a lot of the times just refer to it generally as Salesforce, um, as in the system we will be using going forward. However, there's really two sides to it, which is important for you as the grantee to understand the distinction. There's the core, Salesforce core, which is what we use as development staff. This, to some degree, looks similar to how things looked in Ocean, where there's a whole bunch of pieces of information that we can see. Pretty much everything that you input into the system, we will be able to see on the back end. However, this is going to look significantly different from what you as the grantee are going to be seeing on the front end, which is what we call the portal, or the full title is the Community Organizations Portal. That is very specific, very tailored experience that you will have that will only have the information that is relevant to you, except for some general administration stuff that you may see on the homepage. But that will only have stuff that is applicable to your organization. So make sure if you have any technical problems when you're actually filling out the application, that or any questions about what you should be filling out, make sure you are providing descriptions or screenshots or whatever, because we may not be able to see exactly what you are seeing on your end. Some of the important differences to keep in mind in Salesforce is that as opposed to Ocean, where we had individual unique logins for every user, in Salesforce, we're using the OHID system. If you've used any programs with other state agencies or personally, if you've done things online through the BMV, that's what the OHID system is. It's across the board, a login that you can use for any, business, grant requests, anything like that with the state of Ohio, which is what we'll be using to log into Salesforce. This OHID account is going to be connected with an account that is in Salesforce already or will be in Salesforce. So you won't have to do any extra steps to be able to get in. Also, Ocean, there were the tabs or the drop-down menus across the top, applications, draws, reports, all of them were in there, but they were separated out. One of the only ways to search was through the grant number and stuff like that. And in this case, everything in Salesforce is going to be directly linked to the application that you submit. So the application is the first step, and then from there you'll be able to see where you do draws, where you do status reports. If there's anything else related to that you have to look at, you'll be able to access it through the application itself, which we'll explain when we get there. It's a fairly straightforward system. I also want to put a note in here that draw requests traditionally went directly to our financial team. However, going forward in the new system, our grant analysts, our programmatic people will be reviewing the draw requests. That wasn't the case in the past. We have retroactively made some of those changes for existing programs in Ocean on a case-by-case basis, but in general, this will be the standard going forward. So draws in particular, similar to the status reports and the applications, you're welcome to reach out to your specific program representative first, and they should be able to see that. Like I said, OHID is the primary method or the only method you'll be using to log in to be able to complete your application and do everything else. I will say this may be one of the more challenging parts getting all of your accounts set up if you have multiple people in particular that need to be able to access the system, especially when this is the first time we're doing this application. So there's not a lot of people who have much experience logging in this way. But we do have some support options, and we'll be able to work with you to make sure that you get full access, so that when the application opens, that we're able to get you in as soon as possible. I will also mention that the OHID itself, we may refer to that as your login in general, but specifically it's an 8-digit number. In most cases, it starts with a 5 that you'll be using as your username to log in. Many of you probably already have accounts. I know if you were active in Ocean semi-recently, within the past year or so, you likely have an OHID account that was created if you didn't have one already that was linked with your information that we have in Salesforce. But since this is kind of the biggest hurdle, we'll go into specifics on some support that we provide to help you work through that and get that set up properly. If you've done an application within the last funding cycle, the last couple years, I'm sure you'll be familiar with developments or the community services division technical assistance page, because that's where you get all your application attachments and information and the allocation guidelines, all that. However, we also have some other support stuff you can use here to be able to access Salesforce. Easy for you to find here in the top left-hand corner of the home screen of the TA page is this Ocean to Salesforce transition button right here in the left-hand corner. If you click into it, there may be several different options here, very similar to when you're looking at a list of open applications available. What we're going to be looking at here is the OHID training materials. Click into it, there'll be a hyperlink directly to a document. And there is this several page user guide document for if you already have an OHID assigned to you and you know it, it gives you the ability, it walks you through how you can reset your password and how you're able to ensure you have access to be able to log in. Because if you were just assigned a username, you don't necessarily have a password associated with that. So you'll need to go through that. I also put a little red box here to show you that it's probably a good idea to download it because there's hyperlinks within this document, and it won't let you select it from this preview screen here. Okay, I think that's everything with this. Obviously, the one thing that this doesn't help you with is if you don't know if you have a number or you're sure you don't have an OHID account. So you need to set that up. So we're going to go back to the homepage here on the TA site. Here in the right corner, there's this big red button that says Create Salesforce Case. And we're going to click into that here to show you there's this form on the website. If you're having issues logging in, if you are logged in and you don't actually see the Salesforce button to be able to access the system, which will make more sense when we look at that in a moment, um, this would be the place to do so. I do know if you don't have a number at all and you're sure of that, there is a form that you'll need to fill out uh, that I'm not sure if we'll have available in the chat, but at the very least, we'll have it available for you when we do a follow-up email with a link to the recording and the slides. That you'll need to fill out some information so that we can set up your account properly. Since OHID is a statewide system, there are some more steps that we need to go through to get that set up for you. So it may take a little bit of time if you don't have an account already, but we're more than happy to work with you to get that set up. Oh, that did not mean to move that forward. I know some of our technical assistance people are on here. If you had anything
Mhm.
else on this, you're more than welcome to speak up now.
Yes, of course. And Josiah, that's a perfect stopping point, just so I can get a quick word in. So regarding the access method to get an OHID, the process is changing a little bit. I was made aware this morning that for a different system that we have, a more organized access form was created. The process of creating a case that Josiah has here on the screen will remain the same. You will create a case that sort of says OHID login issue. And that will get a case into the Salesforce system on our end, where we can track that case throughout the sort of life cycle of getting you access. But within that case, we will be communicating to you a form. We'll be sending a form that will require some information about yourself and your organization, as well as either an authorized signature from somebody that is already in the system from your organization, or justification as to why you're requesting access if you do not have an authorized individual at your organization already. And we can provide more information about this process after the meeting. We can send a follow-up email. But yes, there is a formalized process for getting access to an OHID for this system.
Right. Thank you, Jake. That's super helpful. So, okay, this screenshot then still stands. Just keep in mind there'll be a more lengthy form that you'll need to fill out for any staff that doesn't have access to a system or to the OHID, an OHID account specifically. I know many of you, if you had an active account in Ocean, you were likely moved over into Salesforce when we started that transition process, and likely an OHID was created then, which was likewise sent to you. That isn't necessarily true across the board, especially if you are mainly the person who's filling out the application and may not have an active Ocean account since it's been so long since you've been in there. Or if you're a relatively new staff member who will be involved in at any point in this process, there's a good chance that you want to already have one. So please use this form to fill out that information, select the specific category, whether that's actually getting into our system once you've logged in, or if you're not sure or need a new OHID, you can use this. I can't see the chat when I'm in presentation mode, but if Taylor, if you haven't already, can you put the link to the TA site in there so that they can be able to get started on this?
On it.
Awesome. Thank you. Like I said, this may be one of the more complicated parts. So make sure if you're not confident that you have a login, make sure you jump on this as soon as possible. We don't want there to be any delays in you filling out your application. If you want to get started on that as soon as the application window opens, in a week and a half from now. So let's say you're logged in and you want to know where to go to access Salesforce to get started on your application. Here is what the main homepage of OHID looks like. If any of you have used this before, it probably looked completely different because they just did an update on Monday. Um, so any other guidance you may have had previously on using it may be slightly different. Even if all the same information there, it's in a different format. Um, Likely because it's the first option here on the left, when you load in, you will automatically be in the apps, my apps, here on the left-hand corner. If you are not, you can just select it and it will pull it up here on the right in the main page. OHID primarily uses apps to access anything. As you can see, as a state of Ohio employee, I have a My Ohio app here in which I can access a bunch of our systems internally. And then you can kind of see at the bottom of the screen, it's the start of a list of a bunch of other apps that I have access to. In order to access Salesforce, you will have an app that is specific to our system that I'll show you here in a moment. There is a chance it could already be favorited or already shown up here at the top. If so, you can just access it from your favorite list. But most likely, if this is your first time going in, you won't be able to see it. So let's show you what that looks like. So you scroll down, there's probably going to be a long list if you have access to multiple systems or have different reasons for logging into OHID. But what you are looking for is this app tile, whatever you want to call it, that is titled Community Organization Portal, which is the terminology we're going to use when referring to the Salesforce system for your application specifically. There'll be a short description here. There's a little star button here that you can favorite it, especially if you know you're going to be in it frequently. You can have easier access to it. But pretty straightforward. You just click open and that will open up the application system. I will mention if you have used it for HCRP or done anything testing related, you will likely have it, or you will have a separate tile labeled test. So make sure if you're ever involved in any of our testing stuff, understand that that's a different app. I think you can see listed out on my screen some of the other application options. So just make sure you're on the right one when you're selecting the app to be able to get into the system. And so when you click open, it takes you to this home screen. It's very general. There's nothing you really need to do on this page, but this is what it should be looking like so you'll know that you're in the right place. I will mention that if you have access to OHID, you should already have the tile to be able to log in to start the application. Even if the application time frame isn't open, that should still be available to you right now if you're able to log in. If it's not, just like before, you can submit a Salesforce case and we can get that set up for you. All right. Now, we won't get into super specifics as to like the guidelines of the program and stuff like that, because that will all be available on our TA site just like normal, which Taylor will link to you when that's available. Specifically, we're going to talk about the format of everything because even though it's the pretty much exact same information that we were asking in Ocean when you're filling out your applications there, the format is different. So we want to make sure everyone's on the same page when they get started on that on their own. So just like before, when we open the app, It sets us up on the home page. There are several tabs here at the top that can access different pieces of information. We'll talk about it more later, but there is a My Organizations applications here to the right, which is what you'll do if you know you've already started an application or have one that has already been submitted. You'll be able to look at that there. However, since we're assuming that this is your first time, you will be going to the Program Applications tab here at the top that's highlighted in red. Once here, you'll at the very least should have a 2025 supportive housing program listed out. If you're eligible for any other development programs, or there's the potential if you have also applied for like HCRP or something recently in the new system, then they could be listed out here. So just make sure you're finding the right one. But in most cases, this will probably be the only option you have for this upcoming program year that you're applying for. I will also mention that you may have this associated organizations drop-down menu. I think you can see it here um, right below the tab before you select the program. If you're only working with one agency, you're not going to have this option. However, there is the possibility that you could be working with different organizations that you're submitting applications for, or just being involved in the system with either draws or reporting or whatnot. If you're not seeing the supportive housing program, make sure you don't have that option to be able to select a different organization because it will only be available when you've selected that agency that has eligibility for the application. Okay, so you can see some preview information here, but we're going to click into the tile. There'll be similar general information on this page. However, most important to you all is here under the details tab, and I guess it shows it here at the top as well. It will give you the time frame of the application availability. So in this case, it's going to say September 8th, 2025, and it will go out for the month and a half or so that the application will be open for you. Most important is that it'll show the deadline that you'll have to submit the application by. So that should be readily available for you to be able to see, which will be helpful when you're knowing when you have to submit stuff. They may also be a short description and some other information, but when you're ready to actually start the application, there's this button here at the bottom labeled Apply for Programs. So we're going to click that. And then it'll bring a pop-up in which it has the two like application or program types within the supportive housing program that you'll be familiar with if you've done an application before, and it details all this stuff out in the guidelines. But as a reminder, this is going to be very similar to Ocean, in which you have to have two separate applications for the different program types. So if you have both permanent supportive housing and transitional housing, you will need to select here and create those applications separately. You will be able to access them separately if you've already started it, but just important to keep in mind. I know for several of you, this necessarily isn't an issue because you're only doing one of them. So you'll only have to select one of them, but keep in mind that these will be two separate applications. So in this case, we're going to select permanent supportive housing as our example. The applications are very similar across the board. So this will be pretty much identical to what the transitional housing application will look like. But for example purposes, we'll select this, and then we'll click Create Application. One thing I want to say before we start clicking through here is that there is this banner at the top of the page that I've highlighted in blue. This banner is going to have your application number, which will be really helpful to have written down somewhere so that if you have any issues, you can specifically reference the application number when you're reaching out to us. And it also says the organization you're associated with, as well as the specific application type that you've created, which will be helpful if you have multiple. There will be a lot of information here that, as you can see, is grayed out and redacted for the slideshow purposes. But this is all pre-populated information from your organization that is in Salesforce, as well as you as the applying contact who's created the application, uh, your email, your phone number, types of information that we have for you. If something's wrong on this page, it isn't necessarily important to have that fixed for application purposes per se. However, you should reach out to us so we can make sure that that information is updated for notifications within the system and doing all the other um, associated necessities that you have to do for the grant. All right. So once we confirm that information, we'll hit next. Another pretty straightforward page. It'll have pre-selected the program type because we already selected it when we created the application, permanent supportive housing. The grant term in almost every case is going to be 2 years. There's very rare instances where it would be 1 year, but that is an option if that were to come up. But pretty much everyone's going to select the 2 year option. And then down here to the left, you can see there's the service area option where you select it by county. Um, it's fairly straightforward here, but I want to make clear that this is your service areas. So if you serve multiple counties, which I know some of you do, you want to make sure you're selecting all of those and clicking this arrow to move it over into the chosen category so we can properly track what counties you're servicing. Once we've done that, I'll hit next. And this is where we get into the specific financial information. Now, if you've done an application in Ocean, you know that when it says leveraged fund on this page, what it's really referring to is your match funds that are required for SHP. Specifically, SHP requires $1 in matching funds for every $2 of SHP funds. So you should have at least 50% of the total allocation that you're requesting funds for in matching funds, which is what we're about to set up here on this page. So we're going to input the first set or source of matching funds here. We'll click New. It'll show you a pop-up box. You'll notice a trend that there's a lot of pop-up boxes when you're inputting the financial information here. But for example purposes, there's a field here at the top, leveraged fund provider. It's a manual entry. You can put in whatever name you want. For example, I just put leveraged fund A, but you should probably be more descriptive so you can keep track of your different sources. However, you'll notice here that there's also the fund category. In this case, I selected state and local funds. There's a bunch of other options like private funds. There's like tax credits, things like that. But make sure you're just selecting whichever category is most accurate to this funding source. Same thing with the fund type. In this case, I selected grant. There are loans. There's, in-kind donations that can be used as match. Just general donations in general, or that didn't make sense, but just general donations can be an option here. And then you have the option to input the specific amount. I will mention that in many of these cases, you likely have more funds available than are required for match. Taylor can correct me if I'm wrong here, but for this purpose, for funds we're using as match, we only are worried about those specific funds. So if you have more money available from this funding provider, but you're only using, say, 50,000 for match, that is the amount of funds that you want to input here. Okay, so once we've inputted that information, we hit save. It'll bring us back out to this main screen that we were on before. As you can see, that information that we inputted is listed out here, so you can see that. And there's also, it's kind of small, but there's this little caret to the right, which is where you can edit anything you've already inputted. You can delete something if it's just totally wrong and you want to start from scratch. But that information is all editable for you. For example, we're going to add another or leveraged or matched fund option here. So we select new. I input a name, I put a category, I put a fund type, and I put the amount. Now, I wanted to have this example to illustrate that depending on the category and fund type, there may be additional boxes that it selects. Most of them are pretty straightforward, like the previous one, but just in case, I provided loan here as a fund type example because you'll see that a term field popped up for you to put information in, as well as an interest rate for them to input. I put this here just to show that if there are additional boxes available, just make sure you're filling those out, even if it may not be required. If you have any questions about if you actually need certain pieces of information, you can let us know. But for the most part, you should be filling out anything that is available. So let's hit save. Again, it'll bring us out to the home screen and or a home screen of that section, and it will list out all of your options. You can put as many as you want. So if you have a lot of different fund sources, you can input those here, but there is no limit. Once we're done inputting the match funds here, we're going to go into the specific project and activity breakdown. So let's hit next. This will bring us to the project details page. This is the bulk of the information for the specific activities that you're requesting funding for. The breakdown is also going to be very similar here to how it is in Ocean. You're going to need a project, at least a project level for every activity, the eligible activities that you're requesting funds for. So for this first one, we're going to want to add a project. There's the new project button here in the right corner or middle right end. And then, just like with the match funds, there'll be a pop-up box in which you can select the general project category. There's only going to be two options for you: administration, if you're using administration funds, and whatever the name of the application type you're submitted. In this case, it's permanent supportive housing. If it's a transitional housing application, you'll also have that available to you. There is a fillable field here where you can put the project name. In this case, I just put admin, and I also put in an amount in the project budget. It is important to note here that there is an administration cap as per the guidelines of the supportive housing program. That is at 5%. So as long as it's 5% or below, you will be okay to add those administration funds here. So I'll hit save, and then the project will populate on the main section page here. You can see the type and the fund amount, and also a new option to not only edit the information you already inputted, but also the ability to add the specific activity or eligible expenses, whatever you would like to call it, which are what you're actually requesting funds for. So we're going to click that. It'll show a pop-up. In this case, since it's administration, there's only one activity available. It's the general admin, so I had pre-selected that. I put the exact same budget amount as the project since it's there's no additional activities here. And there's the ability to add a description, which I will say for any activity is a good practice to have some sort of description there so we have some more specifics aside from the just general activity category on what you're requesting funds for. So once we've inputted that information, we'll hit save, which will bring us back out to that menu again, and you'll notice that the activity is shown here below the project. Now, this is the specific like funding request breakdown and the format that you will follow for the other activities as well, which I'll also provide an example. However, there is one more thing we have to do with this activity before we move on. You'll notice here to the right, there's this little caret, kind of like there was on the match page, leverage fund page. So we're going to select that. This is where we will assign the match funds that we inputted on the previous page to ensure that you have that 50% threshold. The previous page was just kind of the general match funding source breakdown. This is where we're going to specifically request those and add the funding amounts that are provided as match. So in this case, we have a button here that says add leveraged fund, which we're going to click. I will mention if you just inputted the activity, it may take a second for that button to load. It may not be there immediately. So if you don't see it, don't freak out. Kind of give it 30 seconds. Wait to see if it pops up. If it's not popping up at all after you've given it like that 30 seconds, it's probably because you hadn't added leverage funds on the previous page. So you want to make sure that you take care of that first before you move on to the project and the activity breakdown. So we're going to select this, a pop-up menu again. It'll ask you the source of the funds. As you can see, both of the options I had inputted, leverage fund A, leverage fund B, are the only options I have available because it's connected to that other section. In this case, I also, for the budget amount, added $5,000 because that was 50% of the $10,000 activity request. So I inputted that here to connect it to this activity. Once I have that information, that's all it really asks here. We'll hit save. It'll bring you back to the home screen. There's a good chance that this menu below the activity won't show immediately. So if you don't see the leveraged fund section already, you want to make sure you hit this caret here to the left that's highlighted in red. That will pull it down so that you can see what you added. It'll give you the option to delete or edit if any of the information is different, or you just need to change the funding breakdown for whatever reason. Okay. So once we've done that, now we're going to move on to the other eligible activity breakdowns here in the application. So we're going to hit new project again. This will bring up the same standard pop-up menu as before, where you can select the project type. Like I said previously, you would have the administration option and the permanent supportive housing or transitional housing project type. But since we already did admin, in this case, we're going to select the application type, which is PSH. I inputted a field with just a general PSH project name, and I put the funding request amount, which in this case is going to be the entire remainder of funds that I'm requesting, minus admin, because all of the activities are going to fall under the general application category here, aside from administration, since that has to be tracked separately. You'll also notice that when I selected PSH, two additional fields or drop-down boxes popped up here where it asks you the target populations. This is the same exact information that we had requested in Ocean, so hopefully this is straightforward, but there's a whole bunch of options for the target population one here. I selected one of the more broad categories, single male and female in households with children. But I think there's like a maybe a dozen or so, less than that, but there's a good handful of options to select there. There's also the target population 2 option. In this case, I selected chronically homeless. There is some other options. Um, Make sure you are selecting the proper category that is related to this project type. Okay, so once I've inputted that information, I'll hit save. Again, it'll take me out here to the home screen. I'll have the ability to now add the individual eligible expenses as activities. You'll notice now instead of just general admin, you have several other options that are available to you. In this case, I'm going to use data collection and evaluation as the example. And you also have an activity budget here to the right. So I'll select data collection. I put in a funding amount, and like before, I have the ability to add information in here. So then I'll hit save. It'll bring you out to the main page. You will also have to add leveraged funds here as well, just like you did for admin. So make sure you're doing that. I'd probably recommend do it as you input the activities, as long as you have that information readily available when you're filling out this portion, just so you can keep things straight. But you will also have the caret to the side that lets you see what you've inputted already, which should be easy for you to track. I'm not going to go through and show you each individual activity for all the eligible expenses, but I will show you what it looks like when there's multiple selected out here, and you can individually look at whatever match funds you had available. So once we've inputted all this information, we're going to hit next. Now here is the table specifically for this grant program. This is a almost pretty much identical to how it looked previously. So this should be very familiar to you. As you can see, there's some pieces of information in here. They're not all going to necessarily apply to you. So if it's not relevant, you can leave it at 0, but make sure like that you're filling out information that is specific to your project. In general, this is just talking about capacity if you're not super familiar with this chart. And it talks about like number of existing units available in in these different categories, like a 2-bedroom apartment, 1-bedroom apartment, single family home, etc. So that's available here for you to input. There's also planned units. I don't think that will apply to many, if any of you, because that would be for a new project. I'm pretty sure a lot of you are requesting funds just for maintain existing programs that you offer. So in most cases, you're going to just be filling out these first few columns here on the left. There's also there's a tiny field here at the bottom below the totals that asks for your HIC count data. So make sure you don't miss that because it's easy to look over if you're looking at all these numbers. And there's a fillable description field here at the bottom if there's discrepancies between what that count was and with the information that you're filling out in the table. Now, the other data page should also be very familiar. It's not super different than it was before. There's a short descriptor here talking about using your APR data from the most recent like 12-month window that's available for. Make sure you're following the instructions here to pull the proper data for that. all these pieces of information, number of households served, number of adults served. Um, that's all information that should be collected through HMIS, so you will have that available. Some of the pieces of information also have the ability to input what your proposed number should be. As you can see here on the right side of the screen, and then here at the bottom in the performance measures, uh, it asks for your COC standard percentage and your proposed percentage going forward, with some automatic calculations there. Also, like before, if anything looks off or there's any discrepancies, you'll have the ability to input that information here. Now, last step before we're at the point in which we want to submit the application, this is where the supporting documentation, your file upload, is going to be. If you've done this before, you know that those supporting documents are really the bulk of the application information uh, that you're submitting to us for your requests. This application in Salesforce is mainly just like the funding breakdown, but this really gets into some of the required attachments and documents that you need to fill out to prove that um, you have that proper supporting documents. There's a whole long list. It'll be listed out on our TA site, on the page for the program year 25 supportive housing information. For this example purposes, I just selected 4 of the available document uploads, and you'll see all of them listed out here. When you have the documents ready to upload, here on the right side, you'll see next, in line with the requirement name, you'll be able to click Upload. Shocker, it'll bring a pop-up. You'll be able to put any comments that you think are relevant. And most importantly, there's the highlighted red button here that says Upload Files. Now, I don't have a good screenshot of this because everyone's file systems are different, but this should bring up whatever file folder, digital file folder system you use. So you'll navigate to wherever your required documentation and attachments are. You'll select the specific one associated with this attachment. And then you'll notice here at the bottom of the screen, there'll be another pop-up on top of that that'll show you the progress bar, a little check mark once that file has been uploaded. So we're going to hit done. And then it will completely take us out of that page. And you can see here on the left, there's a little green check mark to show that you've inputted or attached that document. And there's also other information like who uploaded it, which may be helpful if you have multiple people doing the application, and the specific date that they uploaded that, as well as some other options like downloading and deleting. Now, say we went through, we uploaded all the documents. We're going to move on from this page and hit next. And then it'll take you to the summary page, which is super long. You can scroll through it. I didn't get a good screenshot here because it's entirely the bulk of the information that you've submitted so far, that you'll be able to scroll down, look through, make sure it's correct. If there's any errors, you can use the previous button at the bottom of the section and you'll work your way back and be able to edit that. But it will visually show you everything without the ability to edit it on this page. So once you've confirmed all that, you'll hit submit, and then it will completely pull you out of the application, back to the My Applications tab where you can view anything that's pending, anything you submitted, or really any application at whatever point you're at in the grant process. You'll be able to see here. As you can see, it says submitted. I also have a screenshot example of what it will look like if you haven't submitted it yet here at the bottom, so you'll be able to see that. You'll also notice that there's a launch application button. Once the submitted application has been approved by our staff, you'll see it says approved. when the grant agreements come through and everything has been set up financially, it'll say draw ready. You'll have the ability to do draws once that is available, as well as status reports when you get to that point in the process. Okay, and since we're pretty much at time, I'll skip through this pretty quickly. I do have some slides here that describe or that shows you the support tab also in Salesforce. This is a little different than what's on the TA site because that's more about access issues. Um, you'll see here this has the option to upload a case as well, but it's specifically when you're already in Salesforce, but something doesn't look like right, you're not able to input information properly, whatever. We have the option here for this to go directly to our technical assistance people. And it will spit out a case number that you'll be able to track if you need to follow up on anything. Okay, so I know we're right at the time that this meeting was set out for. Um, however, we do have a general office inbox that we have available for you to submit any questions. This is an inbox that I monitor. If it's Salesforce specific, this is the inbox you will send it to. You are also more than welcome to reach out to your assigned grant analyst, program representative, and they can help you through any issues you have, and we can get that taken care of. I also have here the application deadline to keep in mind, or application opening day to keep in mind that it opens September 8th. So make sure if you know you have any OHID problems and getting access into the system that you take care of that. But we'd be happy to help if you have any problems. All right. Taylor, were there any important general questions that we should answer before I stop recording?
Yeah, so a couple things I want to throw out. So right now, draws and reporting is still in Ocean. So that will not occur for the program year 25 grantees who are doing your application in Salesforce. That will not change until the first status report is due for the program year 25 application in Salesforce.
Right.
I guess we still don't know what, and draws too. We wouldn't know what that looks like for like program year 24 grantees. But rest assured, once that transition does happen and that module is built, then you all will be trained on the access and how to do that. Unless it remains in Ocean. So that's a bigger conversation. So just revert to what I initially said. For now, everything's still in Ocean, and the first expectant date that you can jot down for draws and status reporting is going to be for that program year 25 grant, along with the application in Salesforce. So hopefully that made sense. And then someone did ask a programmatic question. So just real quickly, the program year 25 is renewal allocation based, is not competitive. So just tossing that out there to everyone too. And that was all the questions that were in the chat.
Yeah, for many of you, I hope that this is nothing too crazy. Like I said, everything's almost identical to Ocean. It's just the format in which you're inputting the information. There's sure to be some hiccups, especially because this is the first time SHP will be in Salesforce. So if you have any questions, you have the email here. You have contact information for Taylor and her staff. Feel free to reach out and we can work through it.
Yeah, quick note, someone else just dropped in the chat about application opening. It's there on your screen. The application opens September 8th.
Mm-hmm. Well, in that case, I'm going to stop the recording.